Hello, everyone. It's me, Xander Phanes. My pronouns are they, them, and I have the absolute pleasure, nay, the honor, to interview a fellow colleague and can I also say a friend, Jake Stollman. So, hi, Jake. I'm so happy to be interviewing you.
Hi, I'm super excited. So yeah, Xander said, I'm Jake. My pronouns are he, him. We're both members of the Michigan writers community, and where we meet every Thursday night and workshop uh, things we've written. So yeah, that's how I know Xander.
Yeah, and it's a super chill and really lovely writing community. I'm so grateful that I was able to kind of connect in this community. And so I guess without further ado, I just wanted to kind of ask you to tell us a little bit more about yourself as who is Jake Stolman as an author or in general?
Okay, well, I don't know where to begin on just the subject of me. I would say so. My whole life, kind of the one driving theme behind it has been space. I love space. I've loved it since I was a kid. You go back and you find the little baby pillow I had is covered with planets and spaceships and stuff.
I
And
love that.
I've never stopped loving space. As you can see, I'm on the moon. But
Oh yes, obviously.
yeah, so at U of M, I'm an aerospace major, studying the more space side and spacecraft. This past summer, I had the distinct pleasure of working at NASA, even if it was in Ohio. But
God.
I got to work on putting LTE technology on the moon and some of the software stuff that goes into that. Um,
That's so
so
exciting.
it was a good time. And yeah, I've loved space, but when I was in high school, I had always been a big reader, and I'd read a lot of uh, nonfiction things. I was a very, very, very big fan of Carl Sagan, the old astronomer. Uh, And from there, I'd read every book he ever wrote, which were all nonfiction except for one, which was fiction called Contact, that they later made into a movie with Jodie Foster that I quite liked. And I read the book, and I was like, "This is amazing." And obviously, that wasn't my first ever foray into science fiction, but with I love science fiction movies. But I saw the book, and I was super interested, and then I switched over to someone Carl Sagan knew sort of well and was the driving force behind one of the great sci-fi movies of all time, 2001: A Space Odyssey. And that person was Arthur C. Clarke. And Arthur C. Clarke was kind of one of the big three science fiction authors of all time. So I started driving through all of Arthur C. Clarke's work, um, which is a very distinct kind of literature, especially for its time when he was writing, I think, as early as the 30s.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, so he wrote very optimistic, very hopeful kind of fiction where, the year like 2001: A Space Odyssey was written in 1968, or that's when the movie came out. But that was adapted from one of his short stories. And still, in 1968, it depicted that 33 years later, people would be traveling to the moon with the convenience that people were like going on air travel, and you can just book a ticket to the moon fairly simply. And
So
that was very
ambitious.
optimistic. Yeah, it was
Ambitious,
very,
yeah.
it was, and obviously in hindsight that didn't really happen, but it's still a refreshing sense of optimism. And from Arthur C. Clarke, who wrote, uh, among other things, like I said, 2001: A Space Odyssey, as well as Rendezvous with Rama, which is probably my favorite science fiction book ever, and is currently being made into a movie that I would love to work on in some capacity, whether that be in like
Ooh.
a science side thing or a writing thing or just bringing them coffee. That's just a project that I'm very passionate about. So
Bringing
that's a
people
little pipe
coffee.
dream. Yeah, that's a little pipe dream. I just that movie is going to be so good because the director is the same guy who directed the new Dune movie.
Mm,
Uh, and he's just put out banger after banger after banger, and he's someone who I really admire. Anyway, from Arthur C. Clarke, I went on to Isaac Asimov, who was the next kind of big sci-fi author, and he wrote sort of similarly to Arthur C. Clarke, a little drier in style, but the same kind of optimistic, hopeful future. And from there, because the movie, I started getting into Dune and the more new wavy kind of science fiction. And there I got into Harlan Ellison and all sorts of different sci-fi authors that kind of break the bounds of science fiction. Harlan Ellison, he would say he wasn't Harlan Ellison, who is considered by a lot of people to be one of the great science fiction writers of all time. They said he detested being called a science fiction writer, and a lot of what he wrote wasn't sci-fi. Um, but still, I was reading all the science fiction. I was super interested. And, I'd always liked writing and I'd always liked writing nonfiction stuff just for
mm.
like the school newspaper and whatnot. And then COVID happened.
Oh,
Uh,
right.
yeah.
That.
So yeah, that. So I'm I was in the class of 2020. The last thing I did in high school was walking out of the doors talking about making inventing a card game as a joke with somebody else. And I was like, all right, well, I'll see you Monday.
And you
And
never saw them Monday.
yep, I never, no, I saw him a couple more times. Just he works at the local movie theater, but it was kind of sad because I never I never got to have a real cap on high school.
Mm,
But I was already in creative writing class at that time actually. And the teacher was like, okay, guys, I know this is a really hard semester. You guys don't have to write anything. It's okay. Like, this is totally unprecedented. And a lot of people did kind of say, like, I'm not really going to get assigned much work over the break or over not the break, the quarantine. And I was kind of relieved to be like, I think the first impression of everybody was similar to a snow day,
yeah.
where it was just oh boy, we get 2 weeks off of school. This is wonderful. Um,
2 weeks turned into 2 years.
yeah, something like that, and eventually became very clear that this was going to go through the summer. And at that point, I kind of realized that you know what, I'm going to be trapped at home for a while, and I want to have something to show for it. And I don't want to come out of this and just be like, oh, I just played video games the whole time. And so I started writing with a couple of characters I'd already had, kind of tucked away from just, little writing exercises and whatnot.
Mm.
And I said, I'm gonna make a book out of these. And yeah, so I started working on my first novel, and that's been gestating for the last 4 years. It's going to be in April.
Oh
Uh,
wow,
I
yeah.
yeah, I don't know why. When I first started, my very first thing was that I was going to voice record the entire novel and dictate it rather than
Write it.
writing it. Um, and that didn't work out, but that was kind of the first thing I did. And I still have that recording on my phone. And it's, I think, April 27th, 2020.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So in 5 months, it's going to, yeah, 5 or 6 months, it's going to be 4 years, which is insane to me.
The anniversary, let's call it.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be published by then. That'd be
Yeah,
nice.
I wanted to actually ask you about that. If you can tell us a bit more about because I'm privy to a lot of information that the viewers are not. But I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about that book. I want to share the title, but I want it to come from you.
Okay, so the working title is blah, 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 Vision of the Veil. Um,
Oh
that when
goodness.
it went through a couple of other titles. So while we're doing a little bit of history, I'll just give a brief summary of how this thing came to pass through COVID. So it started, some of the characters in the book I've had in my mind since middle school, actually.
Yeah, I echo
Well,
that too. I have had characters in mind since I was a wee little baby. Well, not a baby, but
yeah, I have drawings from, I don't know, 2015 of
Yeah,
at least one of the characters.
something
But
like
this,
that.
yeah, so this book started. I've been a part of kind of like an online fandom for a very nice music video called Starlight Brigade by TWRP. And that music video kind of provided the genesis of the story. Well, not some of the characters, I would say, more than the entire story. And I interacted with some of the people on that Discord for like a year or so. We all created characters because it's just a music video, and they created this whole world in the music video that they didn't really flesh out because of just how short it was. And so we were in there creating characters with about the same level of freedom or more than people making, Star Wars characters. And I eventually left that Discord, but I had the characters. And when COVID hit, I said, I'm going to make a story out of them. And so I made story and I finished it, and I wrote 200,000 words in a summer.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I was so proud of myself. And then I reread it and I was like, this could be way better. This is very not professional. And so I did it again. I felt the same way. I did it again. I felt the same way. Repeat, repeat, ad infinitum, or ad for years until now. And I finally think it's pretty much good to go.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's just how I feel like writing and drafts are for my
Mm-hmm.
work too. Like for the first draft, you have to treat it as a first draft. It's just gonna be not great, and that's okay. That's what a first draft is. But I definitely hear you. Like my first and second, even my third draft for my work, um, is not exactly how I want it to be. But I'm so happy to hear that that the vision of the veil is kind of approaching that final draft, let's say.
Mm-hmm. And I forget who it was who said this, but it's a very old adage that art is never finished, just abandoned. And, as an engineering person, I can kind of appreciate that because
Yeah.
I tend to look at writing kind of like an engineering process where you're trying to accomplish some goal and do it at a certain level. And you can meet requirements in engineering, but you will never have the most optimal design. You can only approach it kind of asymptotically and never quite reach the platonic ideal of the story you imagine.
Mm.
But I don't know. It's definitely been a learning experience and an iterating experience, um, and learning about how writing works, which I knew before, but it's a lot different being a reader trying to write than
A
trying to be
writer.
a writer. Yeah.
Yeah, it does feel very different. And sometimes I feel like I have to, occupy um those two identities, I guess, but also try to separate them while I'm writing. It's
I, I, I
I don't
totally
know.
agree.
So you kind of answered my question if you could tell us a bit more about your book, but I'm wondering if there's, and maybe that's just me because I'm just so excited for it. But I'm wondering if you can give us a little bit more about what is the book about? And it's a very difficult question to answer because I don't know how, sometimes I don't know how to answer that question. I figured it out for my first novella for Doppelganger, but I'm still trying to figure it out for my novel series debut for The Wolf's Revenge. And I'm wondering if you kind of have an answer for The Vision of the Veil.
Well, I'm not usually one for kind of the philosophical answer to that question, so I'll give you kind of the log line, which is a princess who lives in a kind of a sun worshipping dynasty foresees a vision of that sun and all the other stars in the sky being eclipsed and destroyed. And she tries to warn people, except for the fact that because her dynasty worships the sun, she is called a heretic and thrown out.
Oh,
So,
yes, I love it. I just wanted to hear you say that.
all right. Well, exiled. We Xander and I have a common trope, a love of exile
for
in
for
our
some
works.
for I mean, I don't want to say for some reason because it's very obvious, but like, yeah, we both agree that exile is a very spicy trope.
Yeah. So, in terms of themes, um, I would say that on the surface, on the surface, I've had someone say it was just anti-religion, which is not true.
Mm,
It's more anti. Yeah, it's kind of against just the idea of thinking that it's against the idea of ignoring problems and using like spirituality as a substitute for actual
act for
resolution.
action, yeah.
Yeah. And so that not to get too philosophical again, but that is kind of I would say the core underlying theme.
Yeah, definitely. I do see that when like when we're workshopping, I definitely see that. And can I just say as like someone who has a bit of like information that nobody else has yet. Hee hee hoo hoo. I just absolutely adore your writing style. It's so epic, and I adore the way that you kind of portray the characters. Specifically, I have a couple of characters in mind whom I don't know if you're okay with me sharing, or I can just keep them um
Go
anonymous
ahead.
for the time being. Oh my God, I have to say it. Slifer. I love him so much, okay? Um, he's a killing machine, but I'm rooting for him.
So Slifer is for those of you who obviously don't know yet, Slifer is kind of the star soldier of the Empire that Lorne is the princess of. I say Empire, and he's kind of a Darth Vader figure.
Yeah.
He's just the ultimate soldier that is not unkillable, but is kind of a monster, and is kind of like if you took a snake head, a cobra head, and put it on RoboCop, which is how I've sometimes described them myself. But actually, this is a very funny note. Um, if anybody ever asks me where I get my inspiration from, I'll just tell them this fact, and that the whole Slifer snakehead thing was inspired by Lego Ninjago.
Oh my
And
God.
in the old Lego Ninjago TV show, they had this race called the Serpentine, who were a bunch of like snake people essentially, and they had one of them were these blue cobra people, and I always thought those designs looked so cool. And I said, hey, you know what? Maybe I'll make a character with a snake head, and
And so Slifer became.
and so he was born. Yeah, so I don't know. Half of my inspirations are like Cleopatra and the painter John Martin, and then the other half are Lego Ninjago and anime.
Honestly, I love hearing people's inspirations and where they come from. Like my inspirations kind of like some of them come from like, yeah, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Others just come from like a random image that I see or something, or sometimes they come from yeah, like you said, like video games or whatever. And hey, whatever inspires you, just go for it. I remember, so for my novel series debut, um very heavily inspired by Pirates and Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, but of course it kind of it started there but kind of developed into its own thing. Much like how you, Jake, were inspired by a number of things and kind of became its own world. And I just always find it so fascinating to see how um, inspirations kind of build on one another. And I do want to mention that, and um, in the interview, I hope Tia, if you can keep this in the edit, that I do also feel very inspired by your work too, especially when like when I'm listening to your writing and you reading your work, I feel like um being a reader and a writer at the same time, listening to your work has kind of uh, I'd say dusted off a few themes or a few kind of unlocked a few areas in my own stories that I truly appreciate, and I just want to mention that.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, I feel the same way. Like your stories are so fun, and
Yeah,
mine tend to be not dark, but filled with a lot of negative emotion sometimes. And hearing yours, like, are just is just such a fun, adventurous story, and that makes me want to write
I'm so
like
glad to hear.
more exciting, like pretty exciting stuff like yours.
I'm so glad to hear it. Thank you so much. I mean, yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. My work is kind of fun and bubbly sometimes. But the later half of Wolf will be very, very dark.
Uh-oh.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, that's a little bit of sweat on my brow, but
But I guess so with that being said, I wanted to ask you a little bit about on the note of inspiration or just any tips and tricks you have in general for upcoming authors or independent authors like ourselves, you know. I don't I try my best not to get too bogged down about being traditionally published and being kind of renowned, especially because I don't know if that kind of aligns with my values. I like being an indie author, um, and that may not be the case for everyone, but I'm wondering if you have any, you know, advice or tips and tricks for upcoming or indie authors.
hmm. Well, I mean, it's not like I'm speaking from any high mountaintop of success. But
Neither am
for,
I.
for for what it's worth, that I think this is just true in life is don't give up. And if you have a dream, first you gotta see yourself really accomplishing that dream. You gotta visualize getting an agent or getting a reward or whatever it is you're looking for. Um, I know I did personally have some interest in going the traditional publishing route, and I queried 100 agents, 100. I even got like the Query Shark. It was a great resource for those of you who want to send out query letters. Uh, Google the Query Shark and look at some of the posts and their comments. Um,
Absolutely.
but the I sent out like I said, 101 query letters, and I got one partial from my dream agent actually. And I'll be honest, there's a little bit of nepotism because he went to U of M too. But he like even then I got rejected after he reviewed my stuff. And at that actually at the same time I was applying for internships and
Mm,
I was getting constantly rejected from those internships too. And so there was a point around this time last year actually, uh, where I was just sending query after query after query and getting rejection after rejection after rejection, and it felt awful.
yeah, absolutely.
And it was like I would just check my phone and I'd get three different like thank you very much for submitting. However, unfortunately, and it I realized after a little bit that it's like, okay, first of all, the industry, and especially the traditional publishing industry, is very hard to get into right now. because
Mm-hmm.
there are so many people, even like there are people who were stuck at home during COVID that all wrote books like I did, and a lot of people who are on the writers strike, um, all submitted stuff to, or like all wrote books while they were there. I did some kind of non screenplay writing. I know Cory Doctorow is putting out a new book, and just lots and lots of people are trying to be writers at the moment, and that's not to minimize or to make like to discourage. It's just to say it's a hard field, and if you don't get it the first time, it's not because you're not good. It's because it isn't right, and the agent might not uh, just have a taste for what you do. And there's so many different factors. And even if you are like, even if you do think you're not writing well, the only way to get better is to keep writing.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
like it is a fundamental law that if you write and then you make a mistake and then you learn from your mistake, you will get better. Even after a million different pieces, you will have the knowledge and wisdom of that many pieces of writing to inform you on your next one. You'll get better and better and better and better.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. It's always it's really disheartening to kind of, to receive all these rejections between writing, but also with the internships, with your like professional career as well in education. So I really admire that you kind of shifted your perspective and remained um in high spirits, and you didn't take it uh you didn't see it as a flaw in your own writing or in your own character, but it just is what it is, and you just keep trying.
Mm-hmm.
And I love how we kind of went back full circle in the beginning of our interview. You were mentioning that earlier in the interview that the first draft was shit, the second draft was shit, but you kept writing, and now it feels like it's getting to where you'd like it to be. Of course, it's not gonna be exactly where you want it to be, but it's closer, and you're happy with it. And I do feel like that's a perspective that all of us as writers have to practice a bit more, because that's a perspective that the more we practice it, the better we'll be at it.
Mm-hmm. And putting it in more like agent or publishing, whatever you want terms, the more you pursue it, the more likely you are to get that goal you're going for.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like the more you write, the more you'll see agents start to show some interest in you. And like I did notice that as I like the first batch of query letters I sent out and pieces, I got almost all rejections. On the second pass, I got a couple of partials. I did two main things, and I noticed some improvement on the second kind of wave of submissions. And I'm honestly a little tempted to submit again, but at this point, I've like I said, I've been working on this thing for 4 years, so I kind of just want to get it out there.
I see. I hear you. I hear you. And I'm hoping that whatever your goal is, you'll reach it. And I'm just hoping that there will be more. I say this in a very selfish kind of manner.
I do I don't want to say too much, but
Eyes
the,
emoji.
the the ending of this book may not be the ending of the story as a whole.
Big eyes emoji.
I
That's all I
yeah.
have to say.
I don't know much more on tips and tricks and whatnot. Just keep going. That's all you can
Yeah,
do. You
that's
you one of well, another one of the themes in my book is that you may have a 0.0001% chance of achieving your goal. But if you don't try, you have a 0.0000% chance.
yeah, absolutely. That's a really good perspective to
And then
practice.
if you don't try, you're just going to sit around the whole time being sad that you didn't.
Yeah, absolutely. What a way to kind of conclude this interview. And yeah, definitely just keep trying and keep connecting. I guess this is not my interview, this is yours, but I always try to reiterate that it's always good and healthy to connect with other fellow writers, and I'm so grateful that I was able to connect with you, Jake, and other fellow writers, because it can be isolating, you know.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I'll echo that and say if you can find a group of people to read with and to and get feedback from, that's amazing. Like I would totally recommend writing groups for everybody. I was lucky to have this one at U of M, but there are others that you can find anywhere, whether that be on Discord, real life, or something else. I highly recommend, especially if you can read to them, because reading aloud does give you a pretty good sense for kind of cadence and meter and the flow of your writing. So, sorry, I'm blabbing.
no, that's definitely valuable. I appreciate it. Um, So I guess with that being said, I just wanted to thank you so much, Jake, for giving me this opportunity, and thank you so much, Tia, for giving us this opportunity to interview each other and connect in a fellow author community. And yeah, if you all enjoyed this interview, please leave a like and comment below or wherever the comments are. I don't know. And consider following the Order of the Bookish and on our socials, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
All right. Thank you, everybody. See you later. Bye bye.